Hello, everyone. We're just going to give folks a moment to join us. Fantastic. All right. I will get us started. So, hello, good evening. I am Charlie Ocean. My pronouns are they, them, and I am one of the board members of PFLAG Los Angeles. And we are happy and excited and proud to host our trans and non-binary joy panel tonight. If you didn't know, we are in the middle of Trans Awareness Week and month as well. So hi, hello, please be aware of trans people. Jokes aside, it's meant to be a time to understand us as individuals, as a community, and the different needs that we may have, because we are not a monolith. And so that's why we have different folks here this evening. And I hope that when you get to hear their stories and hear them speak, that you'll also follow them on social media. They have wonderful platforms, and they are wonderful leaders in their own communities. I would also like to say thank you to Pro Bono ASL for providing ASL access. Thank you so much. For those of you that are not familiar, this is clapping in ASL. I would like to start by talking a little bit about PFLAG for those of you who are not familiar with it. So starting with PFLAG National, they really do three main things. They offer support, education, and advocacy. And they've been around for over 50 years now. It started with the mom of a gay son, and they have incredible programs. They have wonderful publications online in both English and Spanish, as well as lots of other resources, including a glossary. So if there's been some terms in the LGBTQ plus community that you're not familiar with, I always turn to them as a trusted resource and encourage others to do the same. If you would like to get our email newsletter as the Los Angeles chapter, we'll be sure to include that information so you can sign up and let us know about any other events. And finally, if you are wanting to help us out when the panel ends, a survey will pop up. If you could please fill it out and let us know what you thought of this event, we'd really appreciate it. That all said, thank you again for being here. And I would like to introduce Brett Lord, who will be our moderator for this evening. So Brett Lord is a multifaceted performer, stylist, curator, and community organizer in the LGBTQ plus community. Brett has a passion for creativity and self-expression, and Brett has dedicated their life to using various art forms to advocate for social change and promote inclusivity. Brett is also a writer and editor, providing support and guidance around mental health and well-being, recognizing the importance of holistic care for individuals within the community. So just so folks know, Brett will be kicking us off and introducing our wonderful panelists this evening, as well as handling Q&A, which will happen toward the end of the session. If at any point you have a question for any of the panelists or all of the panelists, please go ahead and submit it to the Q&A button down below. You can also put it in the chat. Otherwise, without further ado, Brett, thank you so much for being here. Panelists, thank you so much for being here. And Brett, I will let you take it away from here.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you so much. And thank you to PFLAG. It's such an honor to be here and hosting, moderating, weaving the thread through this really important dialogue during this amazing Trans Awareness Week. So thank you so much. I would love to. It's an honor to introduce this panel. I'm really excited for what everyone brings. These are incredible humans. And again, second to Charlie, follow them, research them, engage with them. They all do incredible work. So first of all, welcome Nikita Washington. She is a senior UX designer and founder. She is a featured guest on podcasts, panels, and conference talks, discussing her experience pivoting from education and design education to design as a Black trans woman. Nikita serves as the leadership team for Out in Tech. It's the world's largest nonprofit community LGBTQ plus tech leader organization, and she's on the community advisory board for Trans Tech Social Enterprises, which mission is to empower, educate, and employ those facing barriers in education and in the workplace, as well as to reduce instances of discrimination with a concentration on trans and gender nonconforming individuals. Her design and advocacy work is centered on championing early career and underrepresented folks, helping them break into the world of design and demystifying an often gate-kept community and industry. Thank you for being here, and special shout out. Part of our panel is on Eastern time, so we are across the coast, so thank you for being up and being here with us. Moving to the opposite coast, we have Rose Montoya. Rose is a Latina, bisexual, non-binary, transgender woman. Her pronouns are she, her, hers, and they, them, theirs. She's a professional educator, public speaker, content creator, model, and actor. She graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Film with a minor in Women and Gender Studies from Seattle University when she was merely 19. She tirelessly uses her platform to advocate for the trans community, body positivity, and mental wellness. She educates people online every day by answering questions, clearing up miscommunications, sharing action items to fight injustice and anti-trans laws, as well as being open with her story. She was nominated by Out Magazine as one of the 18 educators to be featured in their 2021 Out 100. The issue, and was nominated by Queerty for Favorite TikToker of the Year in 2022. Rosa's speaking experiences includes the largest gathering of transgender people, the Philadelphia Trans Wellness Conference, as well as LA TV networks, the Q Agenda, Estee Lauder Companies, the University of Pittsburgh, Yale University, Stanford University, and many more. Her goal is to spread love and education about her community as she shares her story so proudly and bravely and beautifully, I might add. Thank you for being here. And then next and not last but not least, certainly, is Cody Daigle-Orians. Cody, pronouns they, them, is a queer ace and agender writer, an asexuality educator, and creator of the Ace Dad Advice, social media-based asexuality education project designed to support people exploring asexuality or questioning their sexual orientation. Their passion for education and in supporting queer youth stems from 10 years in the classroom and many more as a freelance teaching artist. Thank you so much. Your platform is super fun. I've really enjoyed following you as well. And it's a much needed side to the conversation as we explore just the multifaceted dimensions of what it means to be trans, non-binary, and queer in this current context. So I'm super excited. I think this conversation is going to be so rich. I want to take a moment to sort of gather everyone. You know, we're on a virtual platform. It can feel a little disconnected. We're across time zones. So I want to just ground in gratitude and reflection. We have an incredible history, incredible pioneers in the community that have come before us, and incredible pioneers that are consistently and diligently leading today and presently. So I'd love to take a huge collective breath together, as eye roll as it can be, to come together and in gratitude and reflection for those who have come before us and those who are working in the community now. So let's take a moment. center and take a really deep breath. Oh, I needed that as well. So this panel is centered around trans and non-binary joy. And I think that's just such an incredible jumping off point, and such an important moment during Trans Awareness Week, because we so often hear everything opposite of joy these days. So to come together around that topic, with that being our springboard, is just a really special moment and time. So what I want to center our conversation around is the idea of not just joy, but truly embodied joy, and meaning fully conceptualized systemic joy. How do we create these systems of support in community, and interpersonally, in our own self-care and well-being, to really facilitate and create a foundation for true embodied joy? I have been doing a lot of work and research in somatic and therapeutic process and transformational healing, and what that means, in regard to being embodied and to being actualized, and how, when I say somatic, we're talking the non-traditional, traditional therapy being, consider talk therapy. You sit in a room and you talk about your feelings or your emotions. Somatic being a little more integrated in mind, body, and spirit. That is a bare minimum definition of it. It's far more complex. Embodied somatic, and politicized somatic work, it means structural, so cultural systems put into place. How do we're so much more than just this present moment and this human here. We're influenced by so much around us. So there's an incredible author and one of the sort of pioneers of somatic practice currently. Her name is Stacey Haynes, and she kind of boils it down, healing and transformation, down to 3 points. One being the presence of safety, presence of belonging, and the presence of dignity. Safety, belonging, and dignity. Those 3 concepts and those 3 states of being, I want to be sort of present through this dialogue as we kind of discuss joy. And those things have to be in place for us to really truly feel embodied healing and joy. So turning to our panelists, I know we kind of talked about this as we led up to this discussion. Let's go ahead and start with Nikita, and let's sort of talk about what joy means to you, and what brought you to this seminar, and how you seek joy in your life.
Well, to provide a little bit of context, so I started my transition in March of 2021. So frankly, somewhat still of a newbie, but it's been a very difficult process for me as someone who has always tried to live authentically as much as I could, but still feeling as if I wasn't where I truly needed to be. And over the past year, I have been going to therapy. I've really been doing a lot of inner reflection and deep thinking, really trying to figure out, like, how am I going to be more of who I should be aligned with. And so for me, really being able to show up with my friends as the Nikita who I am today is something that truly, truly makes me happy. Being able to help others within the community, because a lot of people see me and they're like, well, a lot of the statistics are saying that you, as a Black woman of trans experience, you're not supposed to have a job. I just turned 35 in May. I'm supposed to be deceased at this point, as a trans woman. I'm not supposed to have the type of career that I'm supposed to have and a family that loves me and really supports me. So I like to show others that it is doable. It's not always easy, but there are people who, if you choose to live your authentic self, they are still going to love you. It may take them a minute, but it's also important to educate them, because a lot of those individuals, they're not aware of what it means because they never had anyone to show them. And so you being in their life, you are that prime example. And so I have been one of the only trans individuals in a lot of people's lives that I know that they're like, you have shown me what it is to be a fearless individual, to, be grounded in who you are and not change simply because people do not like you. That's not my problem. I'm going to always be myself, and I'm going to show people that in hopes that they will continue to just be supportive. So that's what I would say.
I think you're spot on in regard to fearlessly pursuing your path, and you've been so successful doing so, and so true to what you knew, regardless of your transness, was your passion, and pursuing that is just, I mean, that brings joy to you, but it also, like you said, in regard to being a leader and to showing people that it's possible. I mean, it's really valuable. So you should be really proud.
Thank you.
I want to move to Rose as well. Rose, what does trans and non-binary joy mean to you?
Wow, Nikita, I feel everything that you just said. I think this conversation reminds me back into like psychology epistemology. For those that are aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's basically this theory that in order to achieve like self-actuality, like, full understanding and joy and becoming like the best version of you, you have to have food, shelter, like your basic needs have to be met first. And, I think back on my life and I think about like the moments where I had the least amount of joy in my life were certainly similar to Nikita, where I wasn't living authentically to myself, where I didn't have familial support, where I didn't have community, and so the joy that I possess today is such a privilege because, like Nikita said, many trans people, especially when it comes to trans people of color, Black trans women being, the most ostracized, of course. So many people don't have the privileges that I have today of, I came out as trans a decade ago. I have had access to hormones, for 8.5 years. I have a very loving and supportive family today. Like Nikita said, it did take time. I was outed as queer in 2010, and for almost a decade, my family wasn't very supportive, but I'm so thankful that they've come around, and so during those moments when I didn't have my blood, family as close to me, I leaned on my community, on my chosen family, on my friendships, on my mentors, on coworkers, on classmates for that love and acceptance. And that brings me so much joy still to this day. I view my family now as so much more than just the people I'm, related to by blood, even though so many of them are loving and accepting. And I do have multiple trans cousins who have recently come out, which is incredible. Um, but my joy is so found in my community and in, moments like this where I get to share space with people who are like me, who get me, and where I get to share my joy with other people, because I have a huge platform, I have privileges that I only dreamed of having a decade ago, and, that so many people don't have access to today. So, I find so much joy, like Nikita said, in, serving my community and in, using, my resources, my privilege, and my, my voice, my own story to hopefully lift another soul. Because growing up, I didn't know the word trans. I didn't know another queer person. I was the first person to come out officially as queer in my high school, So it's like, I grew up so alone and I don't want other people to have to experience that. And so, it's seemingly so simple sometimes that all I need to do is just talk, just share my story, just tell people like this is my life. And sometimes I think I take for granted just how powerful that is and just how impactful that can be. And, I've been learning more and more every year just how incredible that is. And so, I'm thankful here today. This is bringing me a lot of joy. So, yeah, those are some of my thoughts. I could go on and on, but I'll digress
Well,
there.
luckily we've got time, so we will go on and on. I think, and already something that's coming forward is community being so important to finding that sense of belonging, kind of back into the safety, belonging, dignity. Belonging being so integral in seeing yourself reflected, being affirmed by other humans, seeing what you want to see in the world. And then also what I'm just so inspired by is how you two have taken upon yourselves to bring people up. And I think, we're really lucky at this time where we're at a place where we can be in a group having this shared conversation across time zones and states, and be able to really connect in really interesting ways via the internet, and all the pluses and minuses that come along with that as well. So I'm really impressed, and you should just be so stoked about how you use your platform and what you do for other people. It's really incredible. So let's chat, Cody. I'm also inspired by how fresh and new you are to your full transition, Nikita, and how open you are with that. And I know that, Cody, you have a similar sort of later coming to your identity and exploration. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that and how you've been seeking joy through that exploration.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me the joy comes from like a movement away from brokenness in a lot of ways. So I'm a late bloomer on both my aceness and being agender. I came out as ace when I was 41, and I came out as agender at 47. So I spent a really considerable part of my adult life and the formative part of like figuring out who I am, seeing myself through a lens of being like a bad version of identities that weren't really mine. So I came out as gay at 18, and I just thought it was like not good at it. I was gay, but like a lousy gay. And my experience of like being a man has also been the same. I sort of was assigned male at birth, and so I was like, okay, well, that's what I'm doing, but I'm not so great at it. It doesn't fit comfortably. Just like, I guess that's how it's going to be. I'm just going to be not good versions of these things. And so most of my life has kind of been sort of seeing all of the other parts of myself, all of my passions and my talents, and the things that I want to do and the way I want to build community through a lens of seeing myself as a broken version of whatever this is. And for the last like 7 years, coming out as ace and coming out as agender has just been like this wonderful freedom of being able to sort of see myself as not a broken version of something, but as like a really good version of the right thing I should have been able to find all along. And attaching the language and lens that's correct to this body that I live in and what this body wants and how this body moves through the world has allowed me to be like a really cool version of other things. Like I don't think like it's an accident that this random thing of being like a content creator in my 40s, like what? I'm on YouTube and I'm on TikTok in my 40s. Like who does that and why? That I don't think it's an accident that happened after I was able to sort of see myself in an authentic way. And especially with my non-binary identity coming even later, I feel like I am the most true version of myself, and I move through the world in that way. And there's just there's so much joy in that. That person who couldn't quite get it all together isn't here anymore. And now this person kind of gets to live fully and authentically and completely. And like that feels really great.
Awesome. Just diving a little deeper, because I want to make sure, because we're with PFLAG and they just do such incredible work, across the family systems, and the importance of creating resources for families, for young folks who are questioning and experiencing, dysphoria, whatnot, at whatever place they are in the exploration phase. I love to open up dialogue of sharing a little bit about, your earlier journeys into your transness, around where maybe you knew, or when you came out, if there's an anecdote or a story that you'd like to share. And I like to place it in the broader context, as Charlie mentioned when they opened up. We are not a monolith. And I think it's really important to see so many interesting, diverse stories of how we arrive at our queerness and ourselves, because it might resonate with, someone who's going through the same thing. And then I also think it's important to distinguish that we can't all just be lumped under one category and assumed that we all have the same, thoughts and feelings and opinions. So really valuing the individual unique stories. So I feel like, Rose, do you want to share a little bit, maybe a story of your coming out or your journey to your transness? And
I would love to. Like Brett said, everybody has their own journey, and it kind of takes me back to my thoughts earlier on epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge, the study of what we know, how we know it. And I think language is really, really powerful because it gives us meaning. Before I had the word trans to describe my identity, I had feelings, but they were so confusing and scary to me, and I didn't have a word for it. And so I tried to express it, but people didn't take me seriously. And of course, when you add the fact that my parents are both used to be very, very, very religious, my dad, retired worship pastor, my mom, a retired missionary, they didn't have much understanding or acceptance toward any sort of queer identity, right? So I have a video, like a home video that my mom recorded on a VHS tape. And I was playing make-believe at my brother's birthday party. I was 4 years old, and my mom turns over to me, and I'm wearing this silk robe covered in roses. My parents called it Joseph's coat of many colors, if you understand the Bible reference. I called it my queen cape. But my mom turns to me on the camera and she goes, "Oh, are you playing make-believe? Are you playing like you're a king or something?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, You're a king, right?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a queen. And she's like, oh, what's your name? And I'm like, I'm Queen Rose. And my mother is so confused. I have to repeat myself multiple times. And my sister, well, I have 3 sisters, but one of them jokes, yeah, you have a queen for a son, which in so many different layers is hilarious today. Because I've always been a queen. But I found this video in 2020. I was forced, like many people during the pandemic, to move back in with my parents. And one of my projects to keep busy was to convert all of our old VHS tapes onto digital formats. And when I found this video, having come out, years before, I started sobbing, and my mom walked into the room and she was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? Are you panicked about the state of the world? And I'm like, yes, but this is unrelated. Did you know that this video existed? I asked my mom, and she was like, no, I had no idea. And I was like, my whole life could have been so much easier had I been believed, had I been understood, had I had knowledge or language of trans or queer identity at all. Because that little Queen Rose at 4 years old grew up to be a 6th grader who wished herself to be a girl, who begged and prayed on my hands and knees in 6th grade to God that I no longer believe in, that I would wake up the next day and be a girl. It's the same little girl who grew up in high school when I came out as attracted to men and was bullied and ridiculed and sent not to conversion therapy, but a weekly meeting with an ex-gay who tried to convert me. I ended up being suicidal and self-harming, and still living with all of these fears and confusion and wanting to be feminine, but feeling scared of it, not liking drag queens, not liking when Kurt Hummel on Glee dressed up in drag, because I was like, that's too much. But I was so intrigued because something made sense to me. And it wasn't until Laverne Cox debuted her role Sophia in Orange is the New Black. Such an amazing titular role. Orange is the New Black, you love it or hate it. But seeing a trans character played by a transgender human who's such an amazing woman truly changed my life, because for the first time, I had a word. I had an identity. I had representation. And I knew that that was what I was. And and it changed my life, and it wasn't easy. I came out before Caitlyn Jenner. I came out, before the trans tipping point, Laverne Cox on Time magazine in 2015. So I came out before a lot of the incredible representation, knowledge, and resources we have today. Right. And so I was certainly confused growing up, but just imagine, and I'm sure many of you are kind of in the same place potentially that are watching this, that my parents were in, of misunderstanding, of confusion. And, so it took a long time, but I'm, so thankful to be here today, because for a really long time, I didn't see a future for myself. I couldn't imagine a future where I became an old man. That was always my worst fear. I never wanted to grow up and become an old man. I didn't want to do it. And when I realized I could grow up and be myself instead, I could grow up and be an old lady, everything kind of changed. And society and my family just kind of had to eventually go along with that, because here I am, and it's not changing.
Awesome. I think, yeah, so much of what we learn about ourselves at a young age is through our bullies in an interesting way, right? They're the first ones that tell us who we are and aren't supposed to be. It's a really fascinating sort of shared experience in the queer world, whether, we can thank them for it or not, Um, Nikita, do you want to share some of your stories or something from your journey?
Yeah, so I was born in North Carolina, born and raised, and so very rural, very conservative area. Uh, and growing up, like I always had an air of fabulosity. I was always feminine. Um, Everybody knew. And, growing up, I always wanted to, it was just natural for me to express that. It was just simply innate. It was who I am. I was not putting on a show. It was just simply Nikita. And I remember being in maybe I want to say the first, second grade and being called the F word. And I remember kind of even then, but definitely when I think about it now, I'm like, how did those kids at that age knew how to correctly apply that term? Like how did they know in the first and second grade? Like how did they know that because it was very apparent to them that you're different and you don't belong with us. And so I always felt as if I was um, an outcast amongst a lot of people because I'm so effeminate. Nobody really wants to be friends with me, especially not the boys, because it's kind of like, oh, we don't want it to rub off on us. And then we start acting like that. So the females really were the ones that like embraced me and really took to me. But even then, it was kind of like, well, you're still not one of us. So it just kind of always felt like, well, where do I fit in? And then I remember being in the seventh grade, and I remember this boy, his name is Busta. He said to me in math class, he was like, Nikita's gonna grow up and is gonna be a trans woman. And I was like, how you know that? Like, how do you know? Well, he was right. He was right. But he was right. But I remember that really was something that kind of just sat with me because I was like, huh. I never really thought about it. And I distinctly remember being in high school and one of my cousins was like, well, let's dress you up. And I was like, oh my God, really? And so, like, she dressed me up. Oh, I was looking horrible, honey. But at the time, I thought I was looking fly with the busted wig, a little Forever 21 get up. We was taking the photos and all that type of stuff. And I remember just feeling like free as we were taking those photos. I felt what I now know is like true alignment. So much so I even got the courage one time to go to the mall in the get up, looking busted. And I had the courage, and I thought like it was something that I put right back in my consciousness because I wanted to forget that moment. But when I think about it, I'm like, you've always just kind of been bold in that way to really just like do it and not care. And it wasn't until I, learned about Janet Mock, who I absolutely love, absolutely, absolutely, and read her memoir, Redefining Realness, where I said to myself, wow, I really see myself in this woman's journey. She looks like me. I get what she is going through and what does this mean for me? But I always kept going back and forth. Like if I'm going to do it or not. And I would see other people that I knew who were going through the transition, but I was like, well, I don't know if my family is going to accept me. Maybe they're going to shun me. Like I just didn't want to go through that. So I kept putting it off. And it got to the point where, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And I was like, I just really don't want to continue like this. And it wasn't until Pose came on what I saw all those beautiful women of color, and especially that wedding scene, that I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to move forward. And I made an appointment and I started on my journey. And that's why I truly do believe that representation is so important, because you just never know who is watching you, who is inspired by your story, which is why I do what I do. I'm a former educator. I taught for 10 years as Mr. Washington. I taught middle school and high school English. And my oldest group of students now are 25. Mind you, I'm 35. And my youngest group of students are 18. And they're all, either in college, they have children, living their lives, things of that nature. And I have so many rainbow babies who have, because I keep in contact with all of my students. They all follow me on social media. We're all close. One of my students, he is a model now, a very famous model. And I saw him in New York when he moved there, and he said, Nikita, I taught him in the 7th grade. He said, that summer after you were my teacher, I came out to my family. And that meant so much to me. And that was not the first time that students have told me that. And I even have students who are non-binary, who, I have students who embrace, they still identify as, male, but they embrace their femininity just so much more because they've seen me do it. They're like, you've always been free. You've always shown us that. And so you were always a great representation to us. And I was just simply being myself. I didn't realize that after all those years, I was going to receive those messages from those students, that just simply me showing up as myself every single day, even though I was being beat down by administration at times. The parents were just kind of like, what are you doing? And then, of course, society, it really means so much to me. And that is why I often, speak on these panels and things of that nature, because I want someone who has a child who looks like me, or who has similar experiences of me, to know that, like, look, you can grow up to be a senior UX designer. You could be featured in Google like I have. You can be labeled as the Logitech Woman of the Year like I have been. I'm working with Hinge right now. Like, I'm doing so many different things that I never would have thought I would have had the opportunity to do. The Nikita from 10 years ago would have never. It's similar to what Rose said. Just, oh my God, I don't like to even have thought like I could have grown up like as an older man. Like, I don't even know what that looks like, because I'm just so far removed from that at this point, because I'm just so happy that I listened to myself and I took the time to listen and do what it is that I'm supposed to do and be who I'm supposed to be.
We're sure glad that you did too. You're such an inspiration. Something that is, again, it's sort of coming up as that sort of inherent knowing that we all have. I, as a kid, like you, Nikita, I've just been feminine from the get. And I realized, putting my blankets on my head and tying them around my waist and prancing around in my room at night in the dark, creating these gorgeous gowns that were not so gorgeous, but they were to me. And then coming so much later in my life and looking back through so many different phases and really understanding how much I perform masculinity, because I am in a place where I identify more as genderqueer. And that performative aspect of gender that people don't even realize that us queer people have to navigate through the world every day. It's silly things like, I dress in a certain way if I'm going to get an oil change than I do if I'm going to meet a client. These ways in which we have to code switch to move through the world to protect ourselves, to protect our safety. And I think the more people understand that, the more we can free ourselves from having to kind of perform gender as it exists in the binary. There's so much more beauty to be found in between, and understanding that as humans, we all exist in between. There is absolutely no one side or the other. Anyway, I'll get on a soapbox forever on that. But Cody, because you represent another aspect of the identity, and again, coming a little bit later in life, do you have sort of a story or anecdote you want to share that can sort of contextualize where you came into your queer identity?
Yeah, well, hearing them talk about their childhoods made me think about mine. Well, first I wanted to say, since it came up in both of their stories, I am very glad that just under the wire, I will also not be an old man, and that I am very grateful for. Just almost made it. I think of it for me, I relate to the feelings of like being a kid and recognizing that the assignment I was not good at, that it didn't fit, the notion of like being a boy, what didn't fit for me well at all. I didn't like it. It didn't feel comfortable. It felt like a performance all the time. And so, especially like straight boys and straight men always have been like nightmarish to me. They scare the hell out of me. And I sort of thought as I got older that when I would meet other queer people, like that would solve it. If I met queer men, then that would be okay. But I still felt like an outsider with queer men. Yeah, I think for me the challenge, it was so much that like I knew that what I was being asked to do and perform and be was not authentic to myself, but I couldn't see in the world where the option of like no thank you was. Like that didn't sort of exist. It was you're either going to be a boy or you're going to be a girl, and those are like the two options that you have. Because I was a kid in the 80s, so the wonder of the internet was a long ways away. So there was really not like there was no option in the world that matched what I was feeling as a kid. And yeah, that's just what I was thinking about when I was sort of listening to them and sort of living that until now. I mean, I'm very grateful that I wanted to respond to what Rose was talking earlier about language giving meaning. That was so absolutely true for me. It was finding the language of asexuality and finding the language of a gender experience that I was able to really sort of see myself. And then even further, the work of people in internet and digital spaces and internet spaces who were not only like defining those words, but also saying, this is how those words look in my life. This is how I live those words. Seeing ace and non-binary people talk about what their experience was and how they lived those identities were what was helpful to me to sort of see myself in that. Just the words, I don't know that would have totally made a difference, but hearing people speak about what being agender was to them, in that I was able to recognize my experience and then live that experience too.
I love that, Cody. Words and language as a jumping off point, they scratch the surface, but if they resonate in certain ways for one or another, or just seeing somebody exist within them and take them on, it can make all the difference. I want to sort of turn to who I presume would be parents or mentors or anyone in the audience who is in that role, caregivers. It's so common in this dialogue that there's a lot of fear, and I think that most of what parents encounter when they're coming to terms with their child's queer identity or trying to understand is inherently based in fear. How do we sort of approach parents, and what would you say to parents? What has worked with your relationships or building your relationships with parents or mentors? And are there any sort of myths or doomsday things that you can debunk for them as they sort of explore this journey or go on this journey with their young person? Anyone in particular want to start?
Yeah.
Okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I would, for me, definitely provide them with a space where they feel as if they can come to you and ask you questions, but then you also ask questions as well. Because this is a learning moment for both yourself and your child. Nobody has all of the answers, but you can work through it together. Because I know in my own situation, it's always been important for me to feel as if my that one cares. I guess that is what I can say. Because a lot of the times, if I am going through something or I'm confused, like something as simple as, look, somebody did my hair, okay? Now, I'm still learning how to do it. I want to be able to come to my loved ones and say, I need some advice on this. I need some advice on that. Being able to get those answers give me trans joy. Being able to ask about dating, things of that nature, being able to feel comfortable, knowing that you are not going to give me a look of like, why are you asking me? Or shunning me, but being able to embrace me and say, hey, let me give you the 411 because these are things that I did not get growing up. One thing that I always say to this day is that when some people, family, friends, kind of look at me like, you don't know this, I always say to them, I am going through a second adolescence, okay? Like, y'all got to realize that. Like, I can't speak for everybody, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people understand. Like, I'm going through a second adolescence. There are things that I thought I knew, like, as a little effeminate gay boy, that, honey, I have realized you don't know nothing. And so I'm learning it now, like 2 years in, and I'm going to continue to learn, but I'm only going to do that in the way that it's going to be most beneficial to me is if I am able to come to people who I know and trust, who are going to give me the absolute, and I know that they are going to be open and receptive to what it is that I have to ask. And then also be receptive to what I am telling them I am experiencing, and not just simply saying, oh, well, you can't experience that because you are trans. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've had to teach individuals, don't simply shun my experience simply because I am trans. It does not make it less real. It's still happening. It just may look a little bit different from what you have experienced, but it's still happening to me. And I think that as individuals have understood that, we've been able to come together and align much more clearly. So now we can work together to come up with those solutions. So for me, it's just definitely just be receptive to listening, because as I go back to my students again, they've always said, we felt comfortable coming to you because we knew that you would listen. We knew that you would understand. We knew that you would not judge us. And we knew that you would give us the truth. And they still come to me to this day, like, Miss Washington, like, I'm experiencing this. Can you give me some advice and things of that nature? And they know I'm gonna keep it real. So I love that. And I want everyone to have that, because I think that having individuals who are going to just simply listen to you can really resolve a lot of the problems that are going on, because a lot of people cause self-harm to themselves, things of that nature, because simply nobody listened.
Yeah, creating that two-way dialogue, or the channel for that two-way dialogue, and approaching or listening with curiosity and with empathy, rather than having to have the answer or having to have an opinion on everything. I think we're in this sort of cultural, I have to know my opinion and know the answer and know and state it, and I have to make a Facebook group about it, and I have to do the things, and I have to spout off on the comment section. It's too much pressure in a space where there's so much nuance and there's so much learning and growing that happens every day. And that's the beauty of it. That's the gift of having a queer family member, a queer young person in your life, is it's an open door to this incredibly rich point of view of the world. So I'm Nikita. I love that you're an English teacher. It is always the English teacher. We all have our oh my God. It is always the English teacher. It's an interesting, and the dialogue around teachers and schools, and how that is, I think, one of the most important sort of lines that is being drawn right now is in our schools and school boards and book bans and libraries, and just hearing from you and just knowing my experience and how absolutely critical it was to have those mentors and those teachers in those spaces. It's not an agenda, it's a listening and loving and curious and empathetic ear. It's somebody who is going to see you for who you are and what you bring to the world, and want you to have a rich and loving experience. It's God, it's so misunderstood right now. So thank you. I would have loved to be in your English class. I'm sure we would have gotten along great. God, I could talk about that forever. Cody, you had something to speak to parents that you were
Yeah,
jumping
well,
in.
I was just going to add, but I agree about be approaching with curiosity. But something that curiosity, even when you're feeling fear, you can still approach with curiosity. And that beyond just providing a learning space for you in your curiosity, approaching a young person, especially a young queer person, with curiosity is an affirmation that they understand and know their own experience. And I think I encounter young queer people all the time, and something that I see a lot is a deep anxiety of like they're not empowered to trust their own experience of their bodies and their mind. And if we as adult figures, when confronted with a young queer person saying, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I think I am, approaching with curiosity, tell me what that means to you. What is that experience like? That's affirming that they can be the author of their own experience and that they know what's happening to them. And that is an incredibly powerful gift you can give a young queer person at the start of a journey. So it's not just good for you to learn, you are empowering them to be their own storyteller and to know what's happening inside of them, which is an invaluable gift.
Absolutely. I think it's Alok by Manan, I believe. I might be pronouncing that incorrectly. Is a really prolific figure in the trans and non-binary community. They say something to the effect of we need to seek compassion over comprehension. That it's not always about it. You may never understand. You may never fully understand to whatever extent that means to you. But you can still be compassionate. You can still be loving, and you can still see that human for who they are and what they're seeking for their life. So I think there's, again, it's that pressure to know everything and to, I obviously, please do your research, read books, seek out sources, follow all these incredible people, and do your research. But know that if you don't understand at the end of the day, you still will be just fine, and you'll be much better for it. Oh, thank you, Charlie. Yes. Alok's link is right there. Rose, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, actually, because of my personal experience. I think fear is so valid. Like, if you're scared, that's okay. I get it. This is a hard world to be in, let alone if you're trans. We are hearing attacks left and right in the media, in politics, the list goes on and on, like in schools and in books, and it's scary. That's okay. You're allowed to be afraid. I'm giving you permission to be afraid. And I think that fear is also dangerous, though, because while your fear is so valid, and something that I wish I understood as a youth, when I was in high school, I wish that I understood that my parents' fear was coming from a place of love. And that's something that I try to remind the youth that come to me all the time, because so often when fear, is experienced in parents of queer and trans youth, they project that fear onto us. And when my parents, for example, learned that I was queer, I didn't have the privilege of coming out. I was outed to my parents in 2010. And so when my parents found out, they responded with fear first. And I think a huge reason is because I didn't get to tell them myself the way that I wanted to, the way that I had planned to, but wasn't ready for. My parents weren't friends with queer or trans people. They didn't know a trans person until they met me. Knowingly. I mean, they probably met a trans person, let's be real. They probably did, but they didn't know they did until I came out as trans. And they did know a few gay people, but the only gay individuals that they knew died during the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And so they had so much fear for me that my life would be cut short. They saw statistics in the media. They saw people, debating my rights before I ever even came out, and sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dog. She just woke up from her nap. She's barking. My parents didn't see a happy future for me. They were scared. They wanted what was best for me. And they didn't see a future where I could be happy and fall in love and live a long, healthy, wonderful life if I were queer or trans. And so instead, they tried to make me not be queer or trans because they loved me and they didn't want this awful future that they saw for me. And I wish that I had understood that then, because instead I was like, you hate me, you don't support me, this is not love. You know, my response was very defensive. My response was very misunderstanding of their position. And so I urge both youth and parents to have patience with each other and to try to lean into your curiosity with each other, just like Nikita and Cody have said, because curiosity is where that understanding comes. And, you know, fear is so real, but it doesn't have to be, because there are examples. Look at Nikita, look at Cody, look at Brett, look at Charlie, look at me. There are so many examples out there. If you just lead with curiosity and you look for those success stories, you look for those moments of joy, you look for people who fight against, you know, the grain, people who, you know, above, you know, but despite all odds, we rise above. And we exist, we're out here. And that is truly what changed for me. That's truly what changed for my parents, because I almost let that fear end my life. You know, I was so scared of a future of being queer or trans. When I first started questioning my gender identity back in 2013, I was like, oh my God, my life's going to be horrible. No one's going to love me. I'm never going to get a job. I'm going to have to become a sex worker, and I'm going to be single, and I'm going to lose my family. You know, I had all these fears, right? I had all these intrusive thoughts. And we hear it time and time again, and my parents echoed those. But when I met other people who were like me, and when I saw success stories online, is when everything changed, and when that fear started to dissipate. And when I, you know, said to myself, like, oh, this is going to be worth it. Like, there is a future out there. You know, there is hope to be had. There is accepting people. There are people who are going to love me. You know, I never saw myself as a panelist on PFLAG, but but you know, the incredible things did come, and you know, I'm so thankful for that.
I think seeing those examples and the representation in, you know, you brought up, Rose, a really amazing point of we lost a generation of pioneers. We had this huge tragedy and this time period where I think we're still all working through the whiplash and the collective trauma of that, and understanding now, you know, I was doing the math in my head. I've been out for over 20 years, which is crazy because I'm 21. So it's just one of these amazing things that now that we do have people who have it wrong, proven it wrong, leaned into the fear, taken on the challenge of living authentically. I'd I'd challenge you as a parent to lean into the curiosity and understand that with that, there's actually so much fun to be had with exploring just this amazing world that just can transform your life. It's about beauty, it's about affirmation, it's about authenticity. Um, so I mean, it's just there's so much joy to be found in leaning into that fear and shedding a little, understanding the collective trauma of what we've gone through as a community and culturally, and knowing that we are actively proving it wrong now as we move forward. I feel like, I mean, we can keep talking for hours. I do know that we do have questions coming in. I also want to make sure at that point that we do also speak to the kids and the youth and the young people. So maybe we'll sort of wrap in that direction. I have a question here. I want to bring in Cody. We just have a question if you can describe and bring us more into what ACE is, and agender, and some of your identities that are just a little bit less mainstream in the language that we use currently.
I put my ace dad hat on. Yeah, so asexuality is a sexual orientation that describes people who don't or rarely experience sexual attraction. So there's a whole world of folks who are allosexual, that's heterosexual, bisexual, gay, lesbian, pansexual, all of those folks. But we have a community of people who don't necessarily feel sexual attraction or only do so under very specific or certain circumstances. That's the asexual community. It seems like simple. There's a wide range of ways that asexuality can be expressed in a person, lots of different relationships to sex and relationships themselves. But ultimately, the thing that binds us all is that we just have non-normative relationships with sexual attraction and sex. Agender is how I identify, and that is means a lot of things, but generally that's not having a connection to or not experiencing gender. I often like, it's like the no thanks of gender. So yeah, so agender can be used if gender is not something that you connect with, or you feel like you don't experience any kind of binary or non-binary gender. It gets looped under non-binary. But yeah, if you're sort of outside of that experience or don't feel like it connects to you, agender is a word that you can use to describe how you're moving through the world in relation to gender.
Thank you. I love this next question for how it's stated and for the content. As being a fashion person myself, does anyone have recommendations for clothing and shoes for a gorgeous 6'3", fabulous, self-identified gay person who presents and adores their femininity? Yes. Well, I'll start and then anybody else can jump in. Oh my God. Do not diminish. Stand tall. Wear everything that you want to wear and love. Try on different silhouettes, try on different colors, different shapes. I like to, create your ideal wardrobe based on just what feels good. And listen, if they're looking, bless their hearts, they just wish they could get anywhere near you, babe.
Could not agree more. I actually have I have an educational website, thetrans101.com, with a million different topics. With me, nothing is off limits. I want to welcome everybody here to put on their child cap, lead with curiosity tonight. Nothing is off limits for me. I can only speak for me. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to mess up. Don't be afraid to phrase things wrong. That's okay. But to directly answer this question, I do have a whole page on fashion and, feminizing tips in your look. If that interests you, feel free to look it up. But there are so many amazing brands out there that are specific, made for trans femme, trans presenting individuals. And so, I could just list off a few. Your Body has amazing undergarments, amazing leggings, amazing compression garments, amazing, just outer kind of athleisure that's made with our bodies in mind, with different needs for different people, in our preferences. ZHE is an amazing brand owned by the mother of a trans daughter, and she makes different underwear made for our bodies, bodies like mine, trans feminine bodies. There's just so many out there. Tomboy X is a lesbian owned brand that has amazing tucking garments, amazing compression garments. I've modeled for them. There's just so many out there. These are just a few quick little ones, but I have a huge list on my website if you're interested.
I was gonna say, find some folks that inspire you and speak to your style and what you want to conceive for yourself, and kind of, play off of where if they're influencers or content creators, and they're tagging and reposting. I'm a secondhand market girly, so I'm always looking for fun, interesting pieces in thrift stores that speak to me, and that's where I get to really play
If
with.
you live in LA and you want a thrift store recommendation, I got you.
We're going shopping, Rose, next time I come visit. Let's see, I want to move to this question. I'm a person of color in a phase of realizing my sexuality, ACE, exploring my gender identity after growing up in environments where asking questions about these things was looked down upon. What advice do y'all have for those who are exploring themselves like myself, and how to navigate the discussions with parents or family who are anti-LGBTQ+? This could be a whole nother panel. But we'll do what we can to jump in. My first inclination is leaning into found family and having those dialogues and those times and explorations with folks that you find that you resonate with in your personal network before you actively approach those conversations with parents or family. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in off of that.
I would just remind that you also can choose to prioritize your safety, not just your physical safety, but your mental well-being as well.
Yes.
If you know that some conversation is not going to go well or someone isn't going to be supportive, you are not obligated to share those truths about yourself and put yourself in those positions. You can find the community of people that will support you, but you can choose to not share it. You can choose to take that journey and only share that with people that are going to be supportive. Your safety should be prioritized, not just can be, but it really should be. Yeah.
I think coming up on holidays, this is certainly something that is forefront of a lot of queer folks' minds if they're going back to see family. My partner is a LGBTQ plus specialized therapist, and he always does the resources of holiday safety planning guides, where you create sort of this plan around the experience and how you protect yourself and how you want to intentionalize the experience and how you create those channels and those boundaries for yourself. And so he's a great resource as well if you're approaching that in the near future and you want to seek those resources. He's Holistic Homosexual on Instagram. Let's see.
I just wanted to echo kind of what
please.
Cody and Brett are saying. Find your people. Like when I was outed in high school, I found people online. It was Tumblr, it was YouTube, this was before TikTok. This was when YouTube was just beginning, I found my people online, and, those people saved me, and I'm still friends with some of them. In fact, one of them moved to LA and we hang out in person now, which is so cool after being friends for, over a decade online. But I cannot stress what Cody said enough, that your safety comes first. If you are under 18 or if you're not emancipated, if you don't have legal rights over your own personhood, or even if you are an adult, but you live under your family's roof, you don't owe your identity to them. And I know it can be so hard living a double life. I know that. I've been there. And I know how hard it is, to want to be yourself, but then be fearful of lack of support. And so I urge you to, find your community, find organizations, and wait if you can. I know it's hard. I've been there. And, but when you have those bubbles, those safety pockets of the right people that love you and support you no matter what, know that that is your family through and through. Your family will love you and support you no matter what.
There's another question here right along those lines, so I'm moving right into it around holidays and coming out, some of our first experiences with family, and how do you wish your family handled it better? And what I wanted to piece in here is the importance of patience. And I think, Rose, you mentioned patience, or Nikita, I can't remember. They're not gonna always get it right. None of us are. I think reflecting that to them when it feels safe and it feels comfortable, and allowing a bit of grace and understanding and compassion for them and what they're encountering on their end. Patience is going to be key for that. And then again, leaning into that found family and knowing where you do find the support. Does anyone else want to?
Yeah, I know holidays can be extremely difficult for the LGBTQ plus community, but especially trans individuals, because we do feel as if like we're not welcome. We're going to be reminded of our past selves, that our current selves, our more aligned selves, are not going to be respected and seen. And so it can really mess with our psyche, and it can really leave us feeling like, well, why did we do that to ourselves? Meaning, like, why did we go if we knew that they weren't going to respect us? Why did I put myself in that situation? So please know that if you feel as if you don't need to go because you think that it's going to happen, number one, that's totally fine. Do a Friendsgiving. There are plenty of places that will, embrace you during those holiday times, because it can be extremely difficult. I know for me, similar to what Brett was saying, is definitely patience. In terms of, for me, like pronouns. Like, I remember before I told my family that I was trans, I was like, oh, I'm gender fluid. I use they, them. Child, they still say they, them sometimes. And I'm like, no, it's she. Get it right. And then every now and again, they'll be like, well, he. And in the beginning, I used to always correct them. Like, she, yeah, she, just so on and so forth. And I stopped doing it because I had to learn to give them grace. Like, I'm 35. They've been saying he for 33 years. I would love for it to stop overnight. But what I've noticed is once I stop always correcting them, over time, I don't have to anymore, because it's just innate to say it, because they see it. They see it. So really try to make sure that you go in with this armor. If you do decide to go home, go in with armor. Go prepare like, hey, if I gotta leave because somebody say something crazy, leave. Like, that's what I did one time after a funeral. Like, my aunt literally looked at me and said, well, I don't know what you are. Deuces. Like, I got up out of there because I said, I'm not subjecting myself to that anymore. I don't accept that. I don't take that. I'm not going to take that from anybody else, and I'm not going to take that from you, even if you are a blood relative. And so, what you can handle, what you can take. Go in with that armor, go in with that openness, but make sure that if there's anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, not safe, leave.
Absolutely. We are right up at the end of this, and I don't want to abruptly jump off. So there is one more question for Cody, and it's about the concept of being a bad version of being male. And if you don't mind, Cody, I think that this is something that they could absolutely find in your content and engage with Ace Dad your ASDAB work. So I'll direct that question in that direction. And then this final question, I want to frame quickly, and if we can just keep it nice and to the point, what would you say has been the most joyous thing about embracing your trans identity? If there was a top line that has brought you the most joy.
So for me, it has just been seeing possibility open up for myself at this place in my life. That's been the really the most joyful thing. Yeah.
I think I first wanted to say looking at the mirror and recognizing myself, because for so long I hated looking at myself and I was bullied for my looks, and now I'm praised for them and model, which is so weird. But truly, I think that what's brought me the most joy actually is self-enlightenment. You know, once I started questioning my gender, or well, first it was my sexuality, then it led to my gender, then it led to everything else. You know, it was wanting to lead with curiosity with myself, give myself grace, and being comfortable with not knowing everything, and that the world is filled with possibilities and learning and growing and changing. And, you know, I think I don't want to like toot my community's own horn or anything, but like trans people are just some of my favorite people in the world, because we spend our whole lives figuring out who we are. You know, we spend so much time looking inward at who we are. And so I think it's more common than not for trans people to do that in every other area of their lives. Shout out to my therapist, because, you know, I just love looking inward. And that is, you know, what being trans is looking inward and trusting yourself. And so I think that brings me so much joy in a million different ways that I could talk about forever, but I'm gonna leave with that.
Thank you, Nikita.
Rose said everything that I have been feeling. I have been on a self-enlightenment journey. Shout out to my therapist. Saw and spoke with him today, because working on my mental health has been perfect. And just the last thing is what has really brought me joy is just being the Black superwoman that I have always known myself to be. You know, wearing my different hairstyles, wearing my different nails, different earrings, just really being that chick. So yes, that's what brings me joy.
Yes, it brings so many people joy too. Thank you so much. A huge shout out to Pro Bono ASL. We are so grateful that you're here and the representation there. Yes. We are at time, and I'm so full of gratitude, and I hope that everybody takes something from this and can jump into joy. And thank you for PFLAG for having us, and Charlie for putting this together. And that's a wrap.
Thank you so much for having me. I just want to say that to all the participants or panelists, whoever's watching, feel free to reach out. You know, my emails are open. I'm always here. And don't forget that you're beautiful, you're handsome, if that's what you prefer. You are worthy, you are valid, and you are loved. Thank you. This was so much fun and an honor to, you know, I've used PFLAG as a resource for years, even with my own family. So now to like speak with PFLAG, I'm like, this is a full circle moment. Thank you so much. It truly means everything.